come into the engine room. This is a very large machinery space where all the engine, machinery and house operations from this very large space. One of the key benefits, a very high ceiling height all the way through on both sides. So doing all the work is our Cummins 6 CTA 300 horsepower engine. So that runs at about 1800 RPM on cruise, and that'll probably use between 12 and 15 litres per hour. Our fuel tanks, 2 on the starboard side, 2 on the port side, and we hold 7,250 litres of fuel. That will give a nominal range cruising at approximately 7.5 knots at 1400 RPM will give us about 3,000 nautical miles. If we have the sails up and assisting, that will extend that range depending on the winds, the tides and the wave action. So far we've probably done between 15 and 18,000 nautical miles. So we've been to New Caledonia, then across to New Zealand, back to New Zealand, from New Zealand back to New Caledonia, back to Australia, and all the way up to Indonesia, up the top, and back down around the coast of Australia. So the consumptions varied depending on current, wind, wave conditions. So we've got sails up and we're cruising along at about 1200 RPM. We're down to about 9 litres per hour, or about 1.4 litres per nautical mile. If we've got a bit of wind and current against us, that's going to increase because we increase the RPM, and you'll get up to around that 12 to 14 litres an hour, or about 1.6 litres per nautical mile. So overall, the average we could probably get will be in excess of 3,000 nautical miles out of the fuel that we have, including the operation of the generator. So we have 4 tanks that supply the fuel to our day operating tank here. The day operating tank is approximately 240 litres of fuel. We pump that in through these very large fuel filters. One is a water absorbing media and the other is a 4 microns filter. So our fuel going into the tank is very, very clean. Comes out of the tank and goes through our ray cores, and then from the ray cores into the engine water filter separator. So another key feature that we've upgraded in Adamas is the fuel pump system to bring the fuel from the tanks, which we call the bunkers, into the day tank. So we have a valve system that we can select one of the 4 tanks and then pump that through the filters into the day tanks. We have 2 filter pumps. That is for redundancies. On the starboard side of the boat, we've got our hydraulic tanks, our sanitation system, our water maker, and all of our hydraulics for steering on the starboard side. We'll have our generator, which is a Northern Lights 10 kVA. And then on our port side, we have a great working space here, full toolboxes, and a power supply, so if we want drills or charging of batteries for our power equipment, that's all here as well. Everything on the vessel is set up with dual redundancy, so if a pump fails, we have a second pump to ensure we can transfer fuel into the day tank. So being a true offshore explorer yacht, we have solar panels which are around about 1780 watts. That provides the battery charging all day long, and we very rarely use the generator to charge our batteries. We have 2 inverters, but what we've done is separated the inverters so they're actually independent rather than paralleling them, mainly for redundancy. So if we get a failure, we can turn off the inverter, switch the parallel switch, turn on the second inverter, so we always have an inverter available on the boat. What we've also upgraded on that is ensuring that our hot water and our washing machine can be operated through the batteries and the inverter. So whilst we can charge those and heat the hot water from the generator, we can do it through the batteries, and the washing machine can also be done through the batteries versus the generator. Being a genuine ocean-going vessel, we put a lot of effort into upgrading the steering systems. So here you can see is the primary hydraulic pump, which is a 24-volt pump that will run the autopilot and the electronic joystick control steering. Over to the far starboard, there is an additional pump, which is our backup autopilot. What is unique about Adamas is that these 2 systems are completely independent from each other. So we have an independent hydraulic pump, an independent power supply, and an independent autopilot on an independent, which is the main backbone NMEA 2000 system. The second autopilot is on its own backbone and power supply system. And in the steering room, which is at the aft of the vessel, There are two rams that are completely independent of each other. So if we do have a failure, we just turn on the second autopilot and pump, and it's operating completely independently, and we can get to our destination. So Adamas, being a true expedition vessel, it is actually certified to Lloyds Unlimited Offshore 1001A, and throughout the boat we have 3 watertight bulkheads, and as you can see here, that's one here in the mid, one at the stern, and there's one forward. So these closed off during passage allows us to lock off the key areas in the boat for safety if something should go wrong. So Adamas has a full commercial grade fire alarm system. So throughout the boat we have the traditional bells, which are hooked to sensors over here throughout the boat and in the engine room, and there is also the automated fire extinguisher in the engine room. Steering is probably one of the biggest concerns when you're a long way from shore, between 500 or 1,000 miles from any shore. So we operate 2 autopilots on Adamas. They're completely independent systems, which you saw in the engine room with the pumps. So we have a Simrad, which is our primary autopilot, which is a Simrad AP48. And then we have a Furuno 711C, which are all new in 2023. Now, how the boat steers is we don't have a steering wheel. There used to be one, I removed that, and we've gone more commercial grade to be fly-by-wire. So the Simrad is operated by our Simrad NFU joystick controller here, and obviously the autopilot when we're en route. Now, should that fail, we can switch on the Furuno autopilot, and that is steered also by another separate joystick controller here that drives the steering rams. These were very, very big upgrades. Backing on to that, we left the old system on the old network, so we have a separate network. So our Furuno Max 2 series screen is there with maps in it, which is independent maps from the new Time Zero ones. But that allows us then, if we have a failure, we can swap over and you're going to get to your destination. The other thing, we have 2 radars. So the original radar, and we have a brand new Furuno NXT radar with that. So if a radar fails, we can turn on the second radar and we can find our way in the dark or in difficult conditions. The other thing we left in here, we have 2 AISs. Obviously we switch them on and off to keep them running, but also dart independent. So if our AIS fails, we can turn on our second AIS. They're all on independent aerials. And all of the electronics then were supported by a complete new backbone from the top of the mast all the way down through to the stern.